return from executive session into regular session, please.
So moved.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. Welcome, everyone, to your Anderson Township Board of Township Trustees. This is the August 15th, 2013 regular meeting, which is televised. Before we get into the agenda, would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I need a motion to adopt the agenda, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. First item on the agenda is an Anderson Trails Plan update, which will be presented by Planning and Zoning, Paul Drury.
Good evening. The case before you is case 2-2013 LUP. Oh, and I've already advanced the screen. Accidentally. This is a public hearing for the update of the Anderson Trails Plan. And I'll give the staff presentation that's in your packet. We also have some display materials if the screen is not clear. And Mr. Caruso is also in the audience to answer any questions relating to the update process. And also, we just within the past hour, had a public open house to take any further comment on the draft plan that's before you for consideration. So as far as the case history goes, the Board of Township Trustees initiated the adoption process on July the 18th, 2013, and the Zoning Commission heard this on July 22nd, 2013, and recommended approval of the plan. The plan was originally adopted in 1999 and has had multiple updates since that time, the last which was in 2009. And the main goals of the prior plan were integration of walkways into all planning as the township evolves, consistent with the 1986 sidewalk plan, and then development of a plan for ongoing funding of this type of infrastructure improvement, creation of public recognition of the benefit and support of funding methods which may be developed. So as part of the planning process of this update, in early 2013, the Transportation Advisory Committee formed a subcommittee to focus on the trails update. And this initiated. Thoughts were solicited from the public, both from the Anderson Insights, Forest Hills Journal, as well as the Township website. The committee took these considerations. Public meetings were also held during this process. The TAC plans, or the TAC committee meetings were public, as well as other public meetings. Displays were also at Greater Anderson Days. Very similar to this. Actually, these were the displays that were used to also solicit input into the Trails Plan update. So, as part of the plan itself, sorry, with these plans, there's not too much pretty to display on a PowerPoint, so the PowerPoint's a little bland. But for a plan summary, 46 sidewalks, trails, and expanded shoulders were identified and studied. Potential funding projects were identified by rank and divided into categories for special projects or projects with large cost. And this was the ranking and priority table. As in years past, there is a formula for ranking sidewalk segments, and that is based on the formula. And again, these are a little bit difficult to see up on the screen, but as you can see, there's a households within 4,000 square feet, estimated linear segment of the section, dollar costs, total costs, there's a weighted value and a benefit value. And all of these are ranked. Our two top ranking sidewalk segments in this recommended update is a sidewalk segment on Patterson Road as well as one on Markley Road. And then those are the high ranking priorities, then it progresses into medium ranking from there. There are also special trail segments that are in this plan that exceed the cost that would have to be grant-funded projects, such as the Ohio River Trail expansion and that sort of thing. So the Transportation Advisory Committee, again, along with staff, came up with this ranking and priority table for your consideration. And again, it's hard to do the PowerPoint, but if you have any questions on these specific, I know you have the table in front of you, and then I'll let Tom speak on comments that he's received both leading up to the public open house and the open house.
Now, Paul, the Wolf Angle Road project, there's some adjustment on that.
There has been, initially when we first started this process, the update process in early 2013, that ranked very high on this list. However, funding has been received for that project, and that project is already moving forward. So that has actually taken off of the plan because it is in motion to be constructed.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I have received comments and questions about the Anderson Trails Plan for 2013. I have to say all of them have been positive. A lot of questions that people had, they were surprised to see that what they wanted is actually on the Trails Plan. There were some questions that I got that tells me I have to create a wayfaring system for people to get to different areas of the township off of the trails through neighborhoods and that type of thing. So that's something that's been on my agenda for a few years and haven't gotten around to it, so I need to work on that. But overall, I think I haven't had any negative responses. They've all been positive. So that's what I can say. One thing I will say, though, that the public may want to know is we rank these as numerically in an organized way, but politics or fairness may come into when a project is built. And we talk about in the past, we've always looked at, you know, north and south and make sure there's a balance between north and south, that we develop the township in a fair way and in kind of an even way. So, you know, there may be changes, you know, just because it's ranked number 1 and 2, that may not be the case where it gets built as 1 and 2. It may change, you know, in the future.
Oh, go ahead, Vicki.
Excuse me, if I just may add, in addition to the open house that was just held, these boards, as you can see, were at Greater Anderson Days under our tent, and I know that Tom, as well as I, took a number of questions from residents, and I would echo his comment that they were all very positive. People liked the trail system. They were looking forward to sidewalks being built that would provide connectivity to their subdivision. So we did receive a lot of public input during Greater Anderson Days as well.
What was the attendance at the open house?
Just a few, is
Just a
like
few.
4.
Well, that's okay. Well, it's been
Yeah.
well publicized.
It has.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot of calls since, I mean, from the time this process started, you know, I've gotten calls throughout the process for people asking me different things and asking that segments be included, mostly being asked to include segments is what people wanted. And the other thing they've asked for is when is it going to be built? And I have had to explain to people that we do have a pipeline full of projects that are in process of being built. So these are going to be a few years out before anything starts on these projects. So.
I know we've spoken before at TAC meetings about the wayfaring system. My understanding of it was that it gives directions within subdivisions where they might pick up a connecting
That's correct.
Sidewalk or trail system. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that will be done through signage?
Yeah, wayfaring systems generally are used, you create almost a brand sign so that when people see it, they recognize, you know, that it's part of a transportation system. And then we would just develop it so people would be able, if they walked into a neighborhood, they'd be able to follow those signs to get to a sidewalk or part of the Anderson Trails plan outside of the neighborhood. So, yes.
Any other questions or comments?
Go ahead.
On these, just to let the public know, these updates are not done every year, but they're about every second or third year. So
Well,
it's
the
not
last
a little
one, when we first developed the plan back in '98, we anticipated every 5 years, but we're actually a little sooner than that. So the last one was 2009, and we started this one in 2012, so it'll be 4 years. So we really do it based off of when we feel there's a need to update the system, when we've gotten a certain number of the previous plans, projects, either in system or built. We start an update process.
The list over the last 14 years doesn't seem to have gotten any smaller, which is interesting because we're doing these plans all the time. But I think the one noticeable thing that we didn't really have in the beginning were these expanded shoulders, and that's become something that we are addressing now in areas that we can't otherwise build the walkways or bike trails.
That's a very cost-effective way in the rural areas of the township where the housing density it's much lower than it is in other parts of the township. Having an expanded berm system that accommodates, pedestrians and bicyclists, is something that we think will work well for the township in the future on some of these lower density areas. So
Good points.
the other reason why we have more sidewalks all the time is because people want the sidewalks in their area, to be honest with you.
Sure.
So it's an important thing. And it helps the township in so many ways. I'm not going to bore you, but in terms of health and connectivity, and it seems to be that a lot of people want to move to Anderson Township always for the schools, but now this connectivity seems...
We thought it was because of the government.
And that too, absolutely. So anyway, and of course the staff, and my bosses.
Of course.
Absolutely, so.
Tom, one thing that I think people, we used to look at the maps and then we would show this section, and this section. So many of these are infill, where we are actually connecting trails that we built.
That's exactly
prior.
right.
And then all of a sudden you look at it and say, golly, it's coming together.
It's actually a system now. Yeah,
Right.
that's a very big point, because when we first started this, a lot of people would say, well, this is going nowhere. What's the idea of this? And again, you can't build these systems all at once. It's a long-term effort with a lot of people working together. And so, again, it takes a long time, and we continue to work at it. Okay.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Because it is a public hearing, we will take comments and/or questions from anyone in the audience who wishes to address these gentlemen at this time, or this board. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing, and thank you very much.
I would not be opposed to moving the action forward if the board would agree. It's
Where is
way
it?
down on our agenda, but we can...
It's under number 10.
Right. It's the only item on that part of the agenda, on Paul's agenda anyway.
Okay, that's fine with me.
Sure.
Shall we move
Okay.
it forward?
Absolutely.
I would then move that we adopt a resolution of the Board of Township Trustees adopting the 2013 Anderson Trails Plan update as detailed before us.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. Okay. We have before us this evening an administrative appeal. It is regarding the EME Fence Administrative Appeal of Anderson Township Zoning Commission Resolution 2012-1022-03. That's case 7-2008 PUD, Eman Real Estate Limited, 5060 Batavia Pike. And the first thing is I will call for a review and open this appeal. The procedure will that be that we hear oral arguments from both sides, from the attorneys, and the trustees may feel free to interrupt and ask questions of these gentlemen during their arguments. The trustees may then take the matter under advisement and publicly deliberate. We will be able to take 3 courses of action: a motion to affirm the decision, or a motion to negate the decision, or simply to defer the decision until the board's next meeting. So that's the procedure, and first I will ask that Mr. Matt Fellerhoff, attorney for EME, come forward and make his presentation. Thank you. I will add, before you start, sir, that we do have a time limit on these arguments, and that would be a time limit of 10 minutes.
Of 10 minutes, and I think we had a discussion ahead of time. I'd like to reserve a little bit of time for rebuttal. I don't know if anyone's keeping track of time, but I'd like to reserve 2 minutes, so if we get to 8 minutes, if somebody, I'll try to keep track of it, but give me a
We do have a
nudge.
timekeeper.
What,
We
I'm
do.
sorry?
We do have a timekeeper.
Okay, so
And they are tough.
Yeah.
well, and I like that. I like that. That's fine. Okay. Are we ready to proceed?
Yes, please start.
Okay. Members of the board, thank you for hearing this appeal. With me, I represent the EME Fence Company and Lamar Billboard Company. And with me are Ron Eman and Mary Ann Reese with the EME Fence Company and Tom Fahey with the Lamar Billboard Company. This involves primarily a billboard. This is an attempt by the Zoning Commission to take away a property right of these individuals from them. It is a legal non-conforming use. A legal non-conforming use, a property owner is entitled to continue until the property owner decides to stop it. What happened is that in 2008, that billboard existed on the property. In 2008, in conjunction with the township, EME Fence submitted a PUD plan. One of the reasons for submitting that PUD plan was to provide security for the company because they were in the process of working with the township to provide property in the back for the bike trail. So working with the township, that was presented. In that presentation, and you probably will see these plans, the plans were presented and signs were agreed to be removed. Those signs were not the billboard. You may hear discussion of that. The signs were the freestanding signs that advertised the business. Throughout the process, there is, throughout all the years until the fall of last year, there was no mention of the billboard and no mention of the removal of the billboard. It did not happen in the 2008 proceeding. It did not happen in any discussions or any of the enforcement actions that came after that. It only came up when it was brought up by a board member right before decision when the first hearing was held in 2012. These are business people who tried to work with the township and to prepare to improve their business. Because of the economy, they couldn't do it. They found themselves in a very bad situation. They had a PUD that they needed to comply with, but they couldn't afford to do it. So working with the administration, they went back and submitted a new plan to change it a little bit, essentially to split it into 2 phases. When that happened, with the agreement of the administration, and the administration reviewed everything, and at not one point did the administration identify the billboard as being, the existence of the billboard as being in violation of the zoning code throughout this process. At the hearing, Ms. McBride asked at the very end, what about that billboard? Was that supposed to be removed? And it's in the record. Mr. Eman cleared this up completely and said, never was that billboard part of the process. That billboard was not supposed to come down. Because of time, I'm not going to go through that, but that is all in the record. After that, there was a discussion, and the board members specifically said, in their estimation, The aesthetics of taking down that billboard was worth more to the township than the Emens. That's taking away the property right of the Emens because of this EME fence and Lamar because of this aesthetic concern. That's their property right. If we lose this appeal, we will enforce that property right. But I want to get back to the facts of this case now. In the brief that was submitted to you by the township's attorney, it goes into great lengths citing the provisions of the zoning code. What that is doing, the zoning is in derogation of the common law. Anything in zoning needs to be, if it's not clear in the zoning code, everything falls in favor of the property owners. In this case, Mr. Powell's brief is asking all doubts and any concerns about what happened in the past to be found against the Emens, against Lamar Incorporated. That's not proper. But I want to go back to one more thing. If you read that brief, there's a lot of calisthenics about what happened in 2008. If you look at the record of 2008 and the staff report in 2008 on page, 3 of the staff report, I think it's page 4 of your record, it says from the staff, quote, "No signage changes are proposed with this application." That means no signage changes. Then it goes on to talk about 2 existing freestanding reader board signs on the property, and those need to be changed. Those are the signs that were changed. The record clearly indicates that no other signs are going to be changed as part of that application. So no matter how hard one reads the zoning code, it's not there. The board is trying to prove something in a vacuum, saying since it's not there, we're right. Well, it's not a vacuum. It's clear in the record that no signs are going to be removed. That means no billboards. I want to address one other thing, and then I'll take my leave. The process, and we complain about this process, for the zoning commission to approve this. The zoning commission went into 3 executive sessions during this process. The first time they went in, there was nothing else on the agenda. They went into executive session without explaining the reason for going into an executive session. I think this board understands what the requirements of the state law are. The second 2 times they went in to deliberate. There's argument whether that's proper. But they went in to deliberate, and they invited into the executive session. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. They're supposed to be judges. They invited in a sworn witness to take part in their deliberation. I, as the representative of the property owner, didn't have any opportunity to know what was said. There was no opportunity to cross-examination. It's just the same as a judge going back to deliberate and bringing in a sworn witness. That is not proper. It's highly improper in a quasi-judicial hearing. And I'm just going to say one more thing. This billboard provides the income for Mr. Eamon's widowed mother. It's not a lot of income, but for a woman on a fixed income, she's retired, this means a lot to her. This is a situation where a business tried to work with the township, and now it's in a situation where the zoning commission is playing gotcha. It is being denied its property rights. A widow is being denied her extra income to support her through her retirement, and it is potentially going to expose the township to significant liability.
Excuse me, you've been speaking for 7 minutes.
Well, thank you. She's good. It's going to potentially expose the township to significant liability. That billboard has been there for a long time. Nobody noticed it. Nobody talked about it until it became the issue for one board member. Because it became an issue for one board member, and then it turned around into, it became a much larger thing, these people are being denied their property rights. Anderson Township is being put at significant risk. It doesn't make any sense. I've been around Anderson Township all my life. I know Anderson Township. Anderson Township's better than this, than to try to take advantage of a member of the business community in this sort of situation.
We may have some questions.
Oh.
Are you aware of the fact that the accommodation of the Little Miami Trail by the Eman family is actually a sale of the property to Hamilton County Park District rather than an easement donation?
What, the fact that it's a sale or an easement, it's, again, their property.
Well-
They didn't have to give it up. They
Okay.
decided to give it up, and in doing that, they had to make adjustments.
I understand. The original application of the PUD in 2008 did not include in the site plan presented to the board the billboard. Therefore, the zoning board can only react and judge and evaluate on what they're seeing on the site plan. Had the applicant put the billboard in the 2008 application, the zoning board would have been obligated to address the billboard with a variance. But because the billboard was not in the site plan, that process didn't happen. And it's my understanding that Mr. Eman, at that 2008 hearing, did make a statement, quote, EME Fencing, would take down all signs except the one for the building.
He didn't say except the one for the billboard. The billboard was never
For
mentioned.
the building, no.
The sign-
For the building, not the building.
And it's clear, if you read the record, and I'm going to be clear, honestly, the record does not address the billboard. What he is referring to is everything that was stated in the decision. What the staff report says is no signs are going to be affected except for the two existing freestanding signs. No signage changes are proposed with this application. If the billboard was left out of the proposal, frankly, it should have been addressed by the staff. Because the staff didn't do it, it's being held against my client. That's unfair.
It was left out of the site plan. That's quite different. And one of the other recommendations of staff was that there would be substantial compliance with the site plan dated October 8th, 2008. And as I said earlier, there was no billboard in the site.
I want to be clear. The staff considers, and this was in the recent hearing, this to be a legal non-conforming billboard. That means the staff considers this to be legal, not in violation of the PUD. This interpretation is a construct of the Zoning Commission. Everything else in there, other than trying to find a technicality to damage a property owner that tried to work with the township, indicates that the billboard was not part of the application. It was not affected, so it wasn't put in the application. Mr. Eman was clear, everything's clear. Please go back and read what happened in the fall. It was brought up by Ms. McBride for the first time. It was never mentioned before, and now this is just an effort to justify the decision of the Zoning Commission.
I've read it more than once. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
I'd just like to follow up
Okay.
on what Mrs. Rice said. This is a planned unit development. That is the plan. The property owner submits a site plan that details every single thing that's going to be on that plan. I know you weren't of record at that time, but why would they leave it off of something as clear as a planned unit development, not include that sign on the plan?
Because it wasn't being affected by the changes on the property.
Wait a minute, hold it.
Okay.
You can't say that. That's
It's
nonsense.
what the staff said in 2008.
They could have made a mistake, but, and left it off, but if a planned unit development says, hey, everything on this property, then it should have been on the plan, that's all.
And indeed, Mr. Rogers, the architect, made some comment at one point that the sign likely would have to be moved because of the buildings.
If I could address that, Mr. Rogers said it may have to be removed. That is a choice that a property owner has. They have a right to stop a non-conforming use. It may. It didn't say it would be moved. It said it may. That wasn't part of the plan. That was a guess That his statement was may. It wasn't shall, that it had to be. If they decide that it might get in the way, they have the choice to do it. The township can't require them to do it.
Who is responsible for submitting an accurate site plan?
Generally, and obviously I wasn't there, site plans are developed in concert with staff. The
Right.
staff said no signs were being affected. Yes, it was submitted, but if you're expecting Mr. Eman at that point to put a site plan together that is as specific as you want, Mr. Eman is not that sophisticated. You work with the staff, you try to make it happen. This is an effort to rewrite history. That's not what was there. If you read the staff plan, staff recommendation, it says no signage changes.
Let me ask you, on this site plan, was this done by a professional architect, or was this something?
I believe it was done by a professional. I don't know his standards, but it was done by a professional.
Okay, okay.
What would your, I'm sorry.
It just seems to me, I've done site plans before, and for these kinds of things, you want to have as much detail as possible, and this is something that's substantial on this lot, and it should have been included in the original plan, in my opinion.
Perhaps, but as is indicated by the staff, that was not the intent. No signage changes are proposed, with that one exception.
If the site plan, I'm done. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Jackson.
The only thing that we're dealing with here is the appeal of, that was made regarding the decision made by the zoning board on May 29th or whatever that date is. We're not dealing with any of those other things. They're not within our purview to deal with. All we are here to do is to address whether or not we felt they did the proper thing. There obviously could be additional legal action on your part, and you have every right to do that. So, but my question was, back when the zoning commission made a decision, I thought it was a rather courteous decision that they made, is that they didn't make them take that billboard down immediately. They allowed them to allow it to finish through its, I guess, an existing contractual period. What would have happened if they had said, take it down now?
The effect would have been more dramatic. It certainly would have immediately perhaps denied Mrs. Eman her income, and it would have denied her property rights. We still probably would be in the same shape. But
we wouldn't be here today.
We would likely be here. But the important thing is that's not the argument the argument is being made that in 2008 it was required to come down. It doesn't say that in any of the findings. Now, if they were being courteous, that's fine, but it's a new requirement being put in 2012, 2013. It wasn't there in 2008.
Do you have any other?
Well, I
points to
was
make?
hoping to reserve some time. Obviously, we've had a lot of, but what we request is the opportunity to have the site plan approved without the requirement that the billboard come down, just as was required in 2008.
Thank you. Mr. Gary Powell.
Thank you, members of the board. Obviously, you've read the materials. I could tell by the questioning that you'd read the materials that the two sides had submitted, and, you know, frankly, we see this case very differently. We don't feel that it was the staff's duty to tell the applicant in 2008 that they missed something. I mean, they had a professional from Abercrombie put this together. Is the 2008 plan available to be put up? You know, Mr. Fellerhoff talked about how there was no changes to signage, but then differentiated the word sign from what Mr. Eman had talked about during the hearing. Mr. Eman said they were going to take down all the signs except the one on the building, but then Mr. Fellerhoff said, well, there's not going to be any change to the signage. So he's trying to have it both ways. He accused my brief of, you know, being, you know, involved with with a lot of calisthenics. But, you know, the simple fact is that this is the plan that was submitted in 2008 that went through the Zoning Commission hearing, that does not include anywhere on here indication of the billboard. I should note that they did file the plans in 2012 to request a modification of this PUD plan, and they did for some reason put the billboard on there, even though Mr. Fellerhoff said that's not part of the plan. The simple fact is that in zoning, you have certain requirements you have to meet under the zoning code. There's no question that in 2008, prior to the time that they requested a PUD for the entire property, that they had a non-conforming billboard on that property that could stay there forever. The idea with non-conforming uses, however, is that eventually those non-conforming uses will be removed to make way for developments that conform to the zoning resolution. That's the whole basis of allowing them in the first place to continue, with the understanding at some point the property will be brought into conformance. That's what they did in 2008. They presented a PUD plan that's very clear under the code that they have to submit a plan that shows all of the structures, all of the features of the property, and then it's submitted to the Board of Zoning, the Zoning Commission. The Zoning Commission then establishes, if they approve the PUD overlay, that's the new zoning that applies to the property. You have to be able to look at something 15 years from now and say, here's what they're allowed to do on the property. If they submitted a plan in 2008 that didn't include a billboard, they gave up voluntarily that billboard as a non-conforming use. You know, this isn't in the record, but obviously it's subject to public knowledge. You can go onto the auditor's website, and since they had the approval of the PUD overlay, the value of the property there has gone up from about $85,000, it's about doubled over the past few years, and that's because they redeveloped the site, and that's a good thing for both the business and for the township. But it's their burden, not the staff's burden, to say, here's what we want to have for the final development. And if you look on the site plan that's submitted, that became part of the zoning certificate that was ultimately issued for the property. And that shows on the site plan the final development. The graphic on the right side of the screen shows final development. That's how they wanted the property to look after they had the PUD approval. That does not include a billboard. Whether that was a mistake on their part or not, we don't know, because there was nothing testified about that at the Zoning Commission hearings in 2012 or 2013. But it's incumbent upon them to show why it wasn't included. They did include it on the 2012 plan. Frankly, under the law, and under the zoning resolution, I don't think the Zoning Commission had the ability to just say, oh, you left it off the 2008 plan, we're going to allow it to go forward. As I pointed out in the brief I submitted, that if the billboard would have been on the 2008 plan, there would have had to have been some variances considered. It's too close to the property line, it's probably too tall. Those would have had to be considered. If the Zoning Commission at that time said, fine, the billboard can stay there with these variances, if they meet the requirements for the variances, then that would have been fine. The Zoning Commission didn't have that opportunity in 2008, and now to blame that on the Zoning Commission as a gotcha kind of thing is just completely unfair and not supported by the facts in the record. You know, the simple thing is that the property owner had the ability, if they had wanted to have the billboard go forward on the property in 2008, they had the chance to put it on there and have that reviewed by the Zoning Commission. They failed to do that. Again, there's nothing in the record to show why that was left off. They didn't come back in 2012 and 2013 and said, look, we made a mistake. We want you to consider the billboard as something that should go forward on the property. They didn't do that. They came in and, you know, as Mr. Fellerhoff said at the end of the meeting in October, I think of 2012, the issue was brought up about the billboard. It hadn't been on the site plan that had been approved, that was now being modified, or at least requested to be modified by the property owner, and there was a question about whether the billboard was going to remain there or not. And so eventually the Zoning Commission said, well, you can keep the billboard through the end of your contract term that expires, I think, about November 1st of 2017. And so they did that. Just a few quick points. Mr. Fellerhoff is threatening, you know, litigation and damages against the township and all of that. From a procedural standpoint, if you do affirm the Zoning Commission and keep the condition in there that the billboard has to be taken down at the end of the term, he has the right to appeal this to the Common Pleas Court. The Common Pleas Court will then look at both the procedural issues that he's raised, which I think are legal issues that frankly, I don't know that you have to really decide those here. You can if you want, but the legal issues about the Open Meetings Act, but he also has the chance to have the courts review whether or not that is a legal nonconforming use or not. And until the court does that, there's no question of whether the township would be responsible for damages. Only if later it's determined that the township did something wrong, and this again is subject to court review, so a court could say they're entitled to have the billboard remain as a nonconforming use and the township will abide by that. They won't take their property rights. Or the courts could say, no, the billboard was left off the 2008 plan. It is not any longer a nonconforming use. You've lost that property interest. So I'm, frankly, from my perspective, I'm not worried about the damages issue right now. Down the road, we may have to consider it, but, you know, again, this is subject to court review after this board makes a decision. So, you know, I wouldn't let that enter into your decision-making process. I'd look at whether or not they're entitled to go forward with the billboard or whether the zoning commission's decision to condition that to be taken down at the end of the lease term is appropriate or not. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but otherwise I'll wrap up my argument.
Mr. Powell, you've been speaking for 7 minutes.
Any questions?
No.
Thank you,
Thank
Gary.
you.
Does Mr. Fellerhoff have some time remaining? We asked him quite a bit of questions for a response. Okay. Mr. Fellerhoff.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to be clear. I think when Mr. Powell stepped up here, he said that I was saying that there were no signage changes proposed. The staff report says that there are no signage changes proposed, and that was a staff report that was submitted with the plan in 2008. And I just want to address a few things real quick. I really didn't want to get into damages. The Emans are suffering damages as this goes on right now because they are continually forced to get new temporary conditional use permits, which cost money. And the reason they're getting that is because of this ongoing appeal. We've said everything that we need to say today. This could be very simple. This was not an issue, never was an issue until 2011 when it was raised by Ms. McBride. Nobody thought that this billboard needed to come down. Mr. Eman was shocked when it was brought up. Nobody disagreed with him then. The argument now that we are hearing is being built out of whole cloth. I know that you could go back and you pull things out of the zoning code. You can prove any argument you want, but the fact of the matter is, it did not exist. It was not an argument. It was not an understanding of anyone. The record is complete with all of that. And yes, Mr. Eman should be able to work with the administration. That's how things should get done in a township such as this. And if you work with the administration, and even the administration acknowledges that there is no sign change, but for the one sign change that's addressed, which is what Mr. Eman discussed, if you work with the administration, and then 3 years down the road, because you try to change things, because of the economy, the fact that you work with the administration and tried to work with it, but something wasn't in there, it comes back and bites you, that's not fair. Again,
Excuse me, that's your time.
Okay. I just request that you grant our relief that we've requested. Thank you.
All right. Is there any further deliberation, comments, or questions that the Board of Trustees has? Okay. As I stated before, we have basically three options. Do I have a motion?
I would move that we affirm the decision rendered by the Anderson Township Zoning Commission as outlined in Resolution 2012-1022-03, Case 7-2008, PUD, Amen Real Estate Limited.
Second.
Mr. O'Brien?
Abstain at this time.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. All right. That concludes the proceeding. So we will move forward with our agenda. Thank you. Thank you all very much. The next thing is presentations and recognitions, always a very important, pleasant part of the agenda. And I believe we have Mr. Ken Wilson with us, who is the Director of Program Operations for the Council on Aging.
Good evening, and it's good to be with you again.
Thank you.
And I have Cindy Wright here with me. She's on our Board of Trustees. I'm Ken Wilson, Director of Program Operations at Council on Aging. We're a nonprofit organization that provides services to seniors to keep them independent in the community as long as possible, to save taxpayer dollars by providing services in their home rather than in a nursing facility. So we're here today to briefly review the 2012 annual report about the Elderly Services Program and also answer any questions that you may have. The Elderly Services Program makes it possible for 7,000 seniors across Hamilton County to remain in their homes independently through a range of services such as Meals on Wheels and home care and medical transportation. Without this program, many older adults would be forced to go into a nursing facility before it was necessary and lose their independence, their privacy, and their dignity, and at a much greater cost. The cost to this program is $350 per client per month. The cost to taxpayers for Medicaid in a nursing facility is 12 times that amount. The Council on Aging of Southwestern Ohio administers this program. We take the calls from the community, we screen and assess for eligibility, and on a regular basis meet with the family members to make sure that they're receiving the appropriate services to keep them safe in their homes. In 2012, there were 243 Anderson Township residents that received services through this program. To be eligible for the program, you must be a resident of Hamilton County, over the age of 60, and unable to perform certain basic living activities that many of us take for granted, such as getting dressed, bathing, going to the grocery store. More than 90% of the program's funding comes from the Hamilton County Senior Services Levy. And we're pleased to report that it was on the ballot last year and was approved by nearly 75% of the electorate in Hamilton County, which is a record. And we're very grateful for the community's continued support. It was first approved in 1992 and was renewed most recently last year. Unfortunately, despite the levy approval, the levy is generating millions of dollars less in revenue because of declining property values. And because of that, we do have a waiting list on the program, and we're only able to enroll seniors that are in most critical need. So the program is not closed. We are still enrolling people, but it is much more limited than it used to be, and that's because of the limited funding. Over the past several years, we've taken a number of measures to increase the efficiency and extend the life of the program through a variety of efficiencies, tightening eligibility and competitive bidding. We've saved over $300,000 annually to the program, and we continue to look for ways to lower costs to serve as many seniors as possible.
Thanks, Ken. I'd like to tell you a little bit more about how we help the older adults and their families, but first I'll put the need for this program into perspective for you. The 2010 U.S. Census found that more than 1/4 of Hamilton County households now include a person age 65 or older. Among this group, more than 1/3 report having a disability. Our typical client is an 80-year-old woman who lives alone on an income of just a little over $20,000 a year. From this, she pays more than $3,000 out of pocket for medical expenses. Due to declining health and mobility, she is unable to perform daily activities such as housework, driving, bathing, preparing food, or managing her medications. She needs help, but not costly nursing home care. Not only is the program compassionate, it is also cost-effective. It costs taxpayers $358 a month to help a resident on the Elderly Services Program. Compare this with the taxpayer cost of $4,800 a month to provide for someone receiving care in nursing home via Medicaid. The annual report includes stories about other ESP clients that I think you'll enjoy reading. It's also important to remember that the program helps not only seniors themselves, but their family members. Time after time, we hear about working caregivers who are not able to stay employed and productive on the job because they have to help the program to care for their aging parents. It's quite a dilemma that a lot of families face. Also, the program helps spouses stay together in their home if one is struggling to care for the other who might be ill. Clients and their families are very pleased with the program. The average length of stay is just about 2 years. Less than 1% of the clients leave because of dissatisfaction. Most leave because they have a need for more intensive services or they have passed. The most used services in the program are home care assistance, electronic monitoring devices, home-delivered meals, home medical equipment. Throughout Hamilton County in 2012, in the program provided more than, these numbers are kind of big, 430,000 hours of home care to 4,250 homebound seniors. It provided 33,818 months of rental of electronic monitoring devices to nearly 3,400 clients.
Thank you, Cindy. And before closing, I'd just like to mention that the Council on Aging provides services to the community beyond the Elderly Services Program. For example, we operate a call center that takes over 2,000 calls each month from residents that have a variety of questions about their aging relative, and we provide answers to those questions. We also administer the Medicaid waiver programs for the state of Ohio, called Passport, and also the Assisted Living Waiver Program. And most recently, we have it's actually a national demonstration project under contract with CMS at the federal level, where we're providing care transition services out of area hospitals. And we're recently recognized as having reduced the unnecessary readmission rate back to the hospital by a larger percentage than any community in the country. So we thank you for your time and be happy to entertain any questions that you might have.
Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Keep up the good work. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Lovely presentation. Under presentations also, we have Greater Anderson Days Public Opinion results. Mrs. Earhart is going to review those with us.
Yes, good evening. As I mentioned earlier, for the last 14 years, we have had displays such as these at the Greater Anderson Days celebration. The board long ago felt it was important to communicate with our residents in this manner. We have staff and volunteers that work at our tent, and not only do we answer any questions that they may have and present upcoming projects, but one of the other things that we do is our annual community opinion questionnaire. I am happy to say, it used to be that we stood outside of the tent and encouraged residents to come in, and after 14 years, we now have residents that come up to us and say, I'm here to fill out my survey this year. So we're very pleased with the enthusiasm our residents have shown. I don't have the clicker, Steve, so if you, thank you. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for the past 14 years. We started in 1999. And each year we present the results of this survey to the Board of Township Trustees. This is a very preliminary result. We're going to present you with the data this evening, and then we will work amongst the staff and with the board to determine how this data can be used to help us in our decision-making processes. The survey was also available this year for the first time. We placed it on our township website. We announced that through our Anderson Insights newsletter, and the survey was available about a week before Anderson Days, and we kept it up until August 2nd so that others had an opportunity to participate and give us their opinions. We did the survey, as I mentioned, at the tent all 3 nights of Greater Anderson Days. We had a 34% increase in the number of residents who completed the survey. We had a total of 392 submissions this year. Approximately 73 were from the online survey. For some comparison purposes, we're also referring some of the questions, occasionally we will rerun them. If we ask a question 4 or 5 years ago, we may ask that question again to try to see if there's a trend or a change in opinion among our residents. So I will reference some of those throughout the results here. The first question we asked was, why do you choose to live in Anderson Township? This is a question we also asked of some of our realtors, our area realtors, in conjunction with a comprehensive plan initiative to study our neighborhoods and determine how we could improve our neighborhoods, how we could essentially preserve our neighborhoods. So the question that we asked, again, was, why do you choose to live in Anderson Township, or why did you choose to move into the township? Realtors selected public schools as their #1 choice, followed by parks and recreation and nearby amenities, while residents completing the survey online ranked public schools as their #1 choice, closely followed by family and friends, and then housing options and prices. Public schools, family and friends, and parks and recreation rounded up the top 3. Public schools and family and friends were virtually tied as the #1 choice among those completing the survey online. As you'll see the next slide, this is a similar question that we asked in 2001. The results are somewhat compatible with what we received this year. Again, schools, parks and recreation, and neighborhoods were the top 3 choices here. The next question we asked revolved again around some of our comp plan initiatives, where we're trying to determine what additional types of housing are needed in the township. We asked residents how they felt about new housing options, such as townhouses, clustering homes on smaller lots, that type of thing. Most of the family homes in the township are 3 or 4 bedroom, single-family occupancy. I think we're up around 86 or 87%. So this was a question we wanted to find out what the needs were. We often hear from residents that they have, as their children grow up, they graduate school, they want to live in the township, but they cannot afford or do not want a single-family home, or seniors that are looking to downsize, empty nesters. The results of the survey showed that well over 60% of the residents who completed the survey at Greater Anderson Days and online felt that new types of housing were not needed, as opposed to the results that we received from local realtors, where the survey showed a stronger preference for other housing options. Again, we also asked how residents would feel about living in different types of housing, whether it's condos, if it's something that's on a bus line within easy walking distance of a restaurant or shop or entertainment, reasonably priced condominiums, or other multifamily housing options. Most of the residents who responded online were not interested in other living options. However, residents who completed the survey at Greater Anderson Days expressed some interest. Their response was fairly consistent with a similar survey that was conducted in 2006, which is the orange bar that you see on that slide. The next 2 questions that we asked, this is in conjunction with a township resident who approached us and is trying to get Anderson back on the map. If you look at some of the old historic maps of Anderson Township, and thankfully our Hamilton County Engineer's recent map, Mr. Ted Hubbard, they list Anderson Township, they list Coleraine Township, Delhi Township. Some of the state maps do not list townships. They list census-designated places. So you will see Cherry Grove and Forest Hills. You will not see Anderson Township. So while we're working with this resident to try to see what we can do to get Anderson Township on all of the maps, one of the questions we decided to ask our residents was, how do you identify where you live? And recognizing that if you're talking to someone in the immediate area, you may answer that question differently than if you are out of town on a trip. We asked the question in 2 different ways. So the first question was, how do you ask, when someone local asks you where you live, how do you respond? 67% replied Anderson Township, so we're very pleased with that. And those who chose not to say Anderson Township tended to revert to their particular subdivision, their neighborhood, Forestville, Cherry Grove. Some identified Mount Washington and the city of Cincinnati. When we asked the question, and these are the responses with Anderson Township stripped out, so you can see that Mount Washington and city of Cincinnati and Sherwood were kind of the top vote getters there, where people reverted back to identifying themselves with their neighborhoods rather than the township. When we asked the question, if you are out of town or you're speaking to someone from out of town, how do you respond where you live? The overwhelming majority identified their relationship with the city of Cincinnati, which makes sense if you're talking about a regional. If you're in San Francisco and someone asks you where you live and you say Anderson Township, they may not recognize that, but if you say Cincinnati, they will understand the larger region. Each year we ask questions related to the demographics of the respondents. Typically we have a larger percentage of females who respond, and you'll see that track from 2001 through 2013. It's fairly consistent with a little bit of an uptick in females responding this year. We also ask the zip code of the respondents. You can see the better portion are in the 45230 zip code, which is where Beach Acres Park is located, where Greater Anderson Days is held. Other than 2009, which we cannot explain that anomaly there, but other than 2009, it's been fairly consistent as far as the respondents. Although this year, because we did offer the survey online as well, we've seen an increase in responses from 45255 in particular and 45244. So we will continue to reach out next year with this survey via the online version as well. We also asked the age of the respondent. We did see a slight change this year in that we've had some demographic changes with the age, and again, we think that is partially due to the online responses that were available. If you can see the 25 to 44-year-old, we had more respondents via the website than we did during Greater Anderson Days when we captured the 45 to 64-year-olds. So on behalf of the board, I know that the board would like me to thank the residents for taking the time to fill out the survey, for sharing their insights, and we will continue to work with this data and report back to the board. Did you have any questions for me?
Thank you. I think the questions were a little different this year.
Yes.
So it's difficult to compare previous years with this year's.
Yes.
Has there been any thought that maybe we've used the University of Cincinnati, some of their students, to help with some of our project. Has there been any thought to having them help out with us a survey in the future?
We could certainly look at that. One of the questions that several of the questions that we included related to housing.
Right.
That was part of the UC Planning and Design Studio. They are working with the planning and zoning staff on the comprehensive plan initiative regarding neighborhood preservation. So that is partially a question that was included in the Realtor survey designed by the UC planning students.
Yeah, no, because that's of interest to me, because some of our neighborhoods have been around for a little bit, and we want to try to be ahead of that as much as we can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And as I mentioned, we tend to recycle some of the questions every 4 or 5 years just to get that trend line. We also heard loud and clear from many residents that the survey used to be too long, and we received some positive comments this year that the survey was much shorter.
The seatbelt question wasn't on there this year.
No, we have not had the seatbelt question on there, but that is something that we could consider putting back on next year. We also may start asking questions such as, do you use your turn signal? For safety education, if you recall last year, we asked a series of questions about, do you lock your vehicle? Do you lock your home? Do you have a security system? And that's as much to get information about how residents behave as it is to help educate the residents that you need to be cognizant of locking your vehicle, even though you may be in an area that you feel is safe. Leaving your laptop on your back seat with your door unlocked is not always a good idea. So,
Vicki, I think if this information can be applied to any of the goals or priorities of the trustees, it would be helpful.
Yes.
So,
We will
but
work on
thank you
that.
for this presentation.
Thank you.
I understand that our state representative, Mr. Peter Stoutberg, will not be with us this evening. However, I'm quite sure that if you have any questions or any direction for him, that you can pass those along to Mrs. Earhart, and she will be happy to call him. The next part is a public forum, and at each public meeting, we ask that anyone in the audience who has a question or some information for this board may step forward and do so. We ask that they be concise and keep their comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. And please state your name and your address for the record. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address this board on any matter? Seeing no one come forward, I will ask if there are any comments from the trustees.
No, ma'am.
None for me.
Okay. Fiscal Officer, Mr. Kenneth Dietz, what do you have for us, Mr. Dietz?
Well, a couple things. Every 5 years, the township is required to review their depository agreement and to see if there might be other banks that would be interested. We've had Fifth Third Bank for the last 5 years. 3 other institutions expressed interest: PNC Bank, First Financial Bank, and Park National Bank. We received those responses yesterday. My assistant Debbie Hucker and I reviewed them and talked to the administrator. We had our attorney Margaret Comey on the phone and went over the responses. The answers to what the fees would be were pretty much consistent with each bank. There was nothing that stood out that would be financially beneficial to the township to change depositories. The interest that was stated would be very consistent from all 4 respondents also. So it's my recommendation, since we've had good service with Fifth Third over the past 5 years, we've not had any problems with our system. Our payrolls go through smoothly. It would be my recommendation that we would stay with Fifth Third for the next 5 years, since there's not a financial reason to change. That would be the depository. The active deposits in the depository, the maximum amount is $22 million. That number is very high just because we don't want to exceed it. We try to keep that number somewhere between 5 and 10 million. Sometimes when we get our settlement reports in from the county auditor's office, it exceeds that, but we're in the process right now of paring that down, trying to find some other investments. We did award interim deposits to Fifth Third Bank, First Financial Bank, Park National Bank, and PNC Bank because of the responses. We also are involved with our Star Ohio, that's our state bank, for interim deposits. So that's all taken care of in the resolution, and I would ask that the board consider my recommendation.
I would move that we adopt a resolution awarding active and interim public deposits as detailed before us and as highlighted by Mr. Dietz.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Thank you. I would mention that all the proposals, as I said, were pretty consistent, competitive, all fine institutions, and obviously that's why we are continuing to use those as our interim deposits. So I would thank them for the responses. The second item, we have our financial reports that are effective as of the end of July. It's a 7-month period. nothing outstanding as far as going over on expenses. The revenues, or we will get our settlement report, I believe, in the next day or two from the Hamilton County Auditor's Office. We have one change that we need to make, an appropriation change. It's within the same fund. As you know, we do not like to increase the fund, the budgeted funds. If we do so, we have to notify the county auditor's office. So we have, we need money in workers' comp in the fire and rescue fund, and we feel that we can take some money out of the other expenses, tuition. So we need to transfer $11,000 from the other expenses to the workers' comp fund. And I need your approval to do that.
I would move that we approve the appropriation changes within the same fund as detailed by Mr. Dietz.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We have three sets of minutes for approval. I would ask that that the June 20th, 2013 be handled as a separate motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes of June 20th, 2013, with minor, if no changes, if any changes.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Abstain.
I'd like to make a second motion to adopt the minutes from the July 18th, 2013 meeting, and also the August 1st, 2013 meeting, with minor, if any, changes.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. Thank you. All right. Law Director is next on the agenda. Mrs. Comey is not in attendance, but Mr. Gary Powell is attending in her absence. Do you have anything else to bring before the board?
I do not.
Thank you. Planning and zoning, we've done quite a bit there tonight. Mr. Drury, do you have anything further for the board?
I neglected to thank Mr. Caruso, the Transportation Advisory Committee, our co-op Andrew Benoit, and all. We had 2 NKU students, so there was a lot of effort put into the adoption of the trails plan, or the preparation of the draft, which I'm proud to say was done in-house. So I just wanted to publicly thank them.
Oh, good. We thank them as well. Thank you. Sheriff's Office, Lieutenant Matt Guy.
Good evening, how are you?
Well, thanks.
I just have 2 minor issues. There was one liquor license request for a limited liability corporation, Mimi's Anderson, doing business as Mama Mimi's at 8312 Beachmont Avenue. And after reviewing the physical location, we have no objections. The Sheriff's Office doesn't object.
I would move that we not object to a liquor license request for Mimi's Anderson LLC DBA Mama Mimi's, located at 8312 Beachmont Avenue.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Second request for a liquor license was submitted by BWRB Holdings LLC at 8517 Beachmont Avenue, and we also have no objections to that location.
I would move that we not object to a liquor license transfer request for BWRB Holdings LLC, 8517 Beachmont Avenue.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
And if the board has nothing else for me, that's all I have this month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Public Works, Mr. Richard Shelley.
Good evening. I have some rather routine items for the board tonight also, nothing brand new here. Under item 12A, authorization to enter into a cell phone agreement with Verizon. We discussed this a little bit at the interim workshop and had conversation there, and you have the paperwork. It is not always pricing when you develop into a cell phone contract. There are many things that get considered: pricing, contracts, equipment, connectivity, reliability, and all those things weigh in. With that, we're making the recommendation to switch our existing service from Cincinnati Bell to Verizon tonight.
Okay.
Is there, Richard, has there been some discussion with them about reception in this particular building?
Yes. With Verizon?
Yes.
Yes. We have some mechanisms in place that we believe we can use to help boost the signal. As you're well aware, because of the type of construction of this building,
Right.
we don't always get the same level of coverage throughout the entire structure. So we're looking at some boosting capabilities, some cells, some stuff similar to what you would use in your home to help boost the signal in certain areas of the building.
Well, with the use that this building is getting, I think those adjustments will be well received. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So you're saying that we won't have to say, "Can you hear me?" yet?
Can you hear me now?
Anything, Mr. Jackson? No. Okay. Do we have a motion?
I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the execution, God, I love to use that word, of an agreement with Verizon Wireless for cellular telephone services.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
The second item you have is the award of the microsurface overlay. As the board is aware, we try to do a program with this material every other year. I think it's actually been 3 years since we've used this material this time, but in this case, this is a material that we put down in lieu of paving. It does not replace paving, nor does it take the place of paving. It is just a seal coat that we use on the pavement. Again, like you would do at your home, you don't replace your driveway every time it gets a crack in it. You just put a surface on the road, which gives it a new friction course and helps extend the life of the pavement when it's in that certain window. Usually in high-traffic areas, this particular product holds up better than some of the other surfaces, but what you have before you is an offer to do that this year off of state bid pricing, utilizing state bid pricing, and there's still only 2 groups in the state of Ohio that put down this material, so we are limited.
In the select group of township streets, we're going to see that list at some point? Or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We already have it down. It's just a matter of the yardage and the crack sealing, and it's hard to list it exactly because the quantities vary. So what you're approving tonight is the money.
I see.
And if we can get 18 streets, we'll do 18. If the money allows us to do 20, we'll do 20. If for some reason the quantities are heavy on those streets and only allows us 10 or 12, then that's what we'll do. But what you're allotting tonight is the use of the money on the list of the streets to take us as far as we can.
And all that is to try to stay within our budget?
Absolutely. Yes, all this is within the budget and in the existing budget.
Correct. Okay. In your estimation, by putting this microservice overlay, does that extend the life of the blacktop? And
we buy a 5 to 7 year window. It's not a miracle item in any capacity.
Right.
But it buys us a 5 to 7 year window. The best example I can give you is years ago, the parking lot at the operations center was just literally falling apart. We were in a position where we were trying to delay the decision, what we're going to do, how we're going to get there, so we put this coating down, and it held the entire parking lot together till now, which we're entering into a contract last meeting to replace the parking lot. But that extended the life of that parking lot another 5 or 6 years, and we were all convinced it was just about done at that last window. So that's all we're trying to buy with that time.
Thank you.
Richard, how long have we been doing this now? This is microsurface overlay?
Well, at least during my tenure here, and my tenure was last month, that time, and I don't recall if Mr. Sparky, I know he had used a similar product, but not this same product in the past.
So it's been 10 years?
It has, or more, yeah.
I would move that we authorize the Township Administrator to enter into a contract with Strasser Construction, Inc., utilizing state bid pricing for an amount not to exceed $118,900 with a 10% contingency of $11,890.
Second.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
And item C, you have come across a time or two before. If the board will remember, last year was a particularly active year for lighting districts. I think we approved 10 or so districts, maybe 12 in that range. Mr. Dietz and I processed those districts, took them down to the county, and found off that due to some accounting errors based on tax year, years in the rears, accounting year, tax year, that number was off a season. So after approving, we then rescinded. Now we're coming back at you this year. I will need, the goal here was to do about half of them this month and hit the rest of the remaining districts for the next month. But Mr. Dietz and I had sat down with the county and worked it through, and we're convinced we're on the same page now.
Oh, good.
And Mrs. Comey insists that we have to do each of these individually.
I
Yes.
believe it is Margaret's fault, yes.
We can blame her, she's not here.
I'll do my
Yeah,
best here.
because she's not here.
I would move that we award a contract and confirm assessments for Anderson Manor Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
I would move that we award a contract and confirm assessments for Coldstream Park Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
I would move that we award a contract and confirm assessments for Jacaro Drive Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
I would move that we award contract and confirm assessments for Nordyke Trails Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
I would move that we award a contract and confirm assessments for Nottingham Cove Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
And I would move that we award a contract and confirm assessments for Wolfangle Farms Lighting District pursuant to revised code sections 9.30, 515.081, 515.11, and 515.08.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson, I appreciate that. And I will remind that, for the benefit of everyone, every one of those were renewals, based on your reading. None of those were new ones, and so these are fees that have adjusted. Almost all of these went down some. A few of them, I think, went up a penny or two, but nothing of change of significance. So people can expect pretty much what they've seen in the past on their bills.
Yeah, Richard, for these lighting districts, there's about how many in the township?
Pretty close to 40
That's
total.
what I was thinking, 40, 41. And
We're certainly one of the more active townships in all of Hamilton County.
Absolutely.
Most of them, they go, what's a lighting district? So
Yeah. And I've mentioned this at other meetings before, but if somebody would like to organize something in their neighborhood, they can contact you. It's a bit laborious.
It's a bit laborious, but we do have a process in place
Right.
that we have mastered over the time. We send out a petition. The resident takes up the petition, goes door to door, so to speak, gets neighbors involved, gets Duke Energy involved, gets myself and our law team involved, and then we work through the process. The whole process can take 6 to 8 months, and depending on when that falls into construction season, it may push it into the next year. But the process is, it's not our system, it's laid out for us by Ohio Revised Code, and hopefully it'll be one of those things they can improve on in the future.
And I think many people feel like having lights in your neighborhood are beneficial on a number of reasons. Perhaps it even helps in aid in the, perhaps in the sale or ambiance of your home. And the cost is relatively modest.
It is. It depends on how many people participate,
Right.
how many lights, how many lots are involved in the actual district. But, yeah, on the whole, you know, you see anything from $50 to $75 or $80 a half. So,
Right.
you know, you get that a year.
Yeah.
But that pays for the light and the maintenance of the light.
And then you get the benefit of having your sidewalks or your streets lit. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Richard.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Next, we have the Fire and Rescue Department. Chief Mark Ober has something for us.
Thank you. Good evening. The only thing on the agenda tonight is you have a resolution in front of you accepting donation from the Fellowship of Christian Paramedics Incorporated, and a little bit about how this transpired. As I mentioned in a memo, Battalion Chief Martin discovered through some of our personnel that mattresses were available for our fire stations. And this organization is out of Lexington, Kentucky area, and these are mattresses that don't quite meet the standard of the manufacturer, so they donated them to the 501c3 organization, and they make them available to local departments. So we got on board, sent one of our trucks down there, brought back 22 of them, and that's approximately a savings of $26,000. So I thank everyone in our organization for stepping up and bringing that information forward. And with that said, we have a resolution to accept those.
I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing the acceptance of donation from Fellowship of Christian Paramedics Incorporated.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes. That's well done, I think.
All right, I'll pass the word on. Thank you.
Like the price.
Yeah, it's great. It's just tremendous. Great for the firefighters as well. All right. Next, we have our Township Administrator, Mrs. Earhart. We also have Assistant Administrators, Mr. Steve Severs and Ms. Suzanne Parker.
Yes, and good evening again. Ms. Parker has the first item for the board's consideration.
This first item is a request that the board consider renewing our relationship with the Frank Gates Company. As you know, we've used them as our third-party administrator for a number of years. As required by our participation in the Ohio Township Association's group rating program for our workers' comp premiums. By participating in this OTA group, we expect to save a little over $67,000 on our 2014 premiums. And as part of participating, we pay an administrative fee of $23,765 to the Frank Gates Company. They manage our claims, they manage the money side, they handle many of the legalities, which saves us a great deal of money. And it has worked out to be a great relationship. Even though we pay them a fee, we still come out ahead by participating. So unless you have any questions, I would ask that the board renew our relationship with Frank Gates.
I would move that we authorize payment of $23,765 to the Frank Gates Company for Anderson Township's participation in the Ohio Township Association's Workers' Compensation Group Rating Program for the policy year of January through December 2014.
Second?
Did
Mr.
we have
O'Brien?
further discussion?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Severs is up next.
Good evening. I have two items for the board's consideration this evening. First of which relates to the telecommunications tower at the Operations Center campus, 7954 Beachmont Avenue. As outlined by staff, that one of the existing leaseholders on that tower is terminating their lease, and we've had some discussions internally about the best way to promote that facility and maximize its use. It's staff's recommendation to proceed with issuing a request for proposals for the management and/or leasing of that site, and we request board action to do so. We'd then bring back the proposals, and we could have a further discussion at that time. So,
I would move that we authorize the Township Administrator to seek proposals for the leasing and/or management of the Anderson Township Telecommunication Tower located at 7954 Beachmont Avenue.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
thank you, and we will hopefully return later this year with some information there. Second item I have is just a note of awareness beginning on Monday, or Sunday, I should say. This coming Sunday, Metro will be, I guess maybe in honor of their 40th anniversary, which is the luncheon tomorrow. They'll be changing some routes, one of which is in Anderson Township, Route 24, which provides daily service out to Wolf Angle Road, to the Anderson Town Center, Mercy Hospital, through the western part of the township into the city of Cincinnati, ultimately going through Clifton and downtown. The eastern end of that route, and you see the images behind you, the map to the left is the existing configuration of that route, which weaves its way out Beachmont, down Sutton, across Salem, back up Beacon, down Beachmont, down Bernie, across Salem. Fairly circuitous route, but it does serve a lot of homes in that area. Metro conducted a lot of research and looked at the ridership surveys where people were getting on and getting off the bus and made some recommendations. Staff worked with Metro to finesse those a little bit. We support the change there in the Beachmont. It will bring the bus directly out Beachmont rather than making that additional leg down Bernie and Salem. That'll provide direct access to Beach Acres, and Metro's in the process actually of updating the map at the township's request to place Beach Acres on the map as a destination for folks coming out to that facility. The other change that Metro is considering related to the eastern terminus. Currently the bus goes out Beachmont, goes north on Wolf Angle, around Mercy, comes back to the Anderson Center Station, and basically then makes a reverse loop back out. Earlier, Metro's plans were to terminate that route at Anderson Center Station, not to serve Wolf Angle, and in fact not to serve Mercy Hospital Anderson. They have kind of sided with the township and agree with our suggestion about maintaining that, and the route, as you can see through on the right side, will continue the service up Wolf Angle to the hospital down to the Anderson Center Station, but beginning on Sunday, that route, instead of going back in reverse, will continue out Town Center Way, right out by Kroger, and then take a right on Beachmont and head back west. So it should pick up some additional, it'll shave a few minutes off the route. It'll provide a little timelier service. We are in conversations as recently as 10 o'clock this morning with Kroger about trying to install a temporary facility along Town Center Way. Unfortunately, we need their land to do that, and hopefully we'll get their permission, right of entry to do that. As probably has been discussed before, Kroger has plans for the future of that area, but they seem amenable at least to some short-term improvements, which will improve the center as well and access for their employees and customers that use the bus. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer. I just wanted to report back. Again, there were other changes that were recommended with Route 75 and Route 30, but none of those express route changes are being contemplated at this time. So, questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
The next item we have for the board this evening involves the Hamilton County Stormwater District. As the board is aware, the district was formed in 2003 and operates under a permit from the Ohio Environmental Protection Agency. The permit requires that the district reduce pollutants in local waterways, everything from reducing oil to fertilizer, pesticides, pet waste, that type of thing in our water supply. There is a fee that has been established to help the county and to help the township be compliant with the EPA mandate, and the board is asked every year for its decision whether or not it wishes to continue to be a member of the district rather than the township taking on the duties on its own, and also establishes a process for billing residents. That motion is before you for your consideration.
I would move that the township administrator be authorized to execute on behalf of the board the stormwater district level of service options and service fee elections for 2014 with the Hamilton County Stormwater District in substantially the form before this board, with such changes thereto as shall not, in her judgment, after consultation with the law director, be detrimental to the township, such determination being evidenced by her execution of said agreement.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
Thank you. I will, with the board's agreement, talk about the next two items as a combined into one. It is the senior center agreement for the operations and management of the senior center, and also a lease for the Anderson Senior Center. The board has a good, long-standing relationship with Senior Independence, which is part of the Ohio Presbyterian Retirement Services. The board has for several years provided funding for educational activities and programs, social programs at the Anderson Senior Center for township residents. And there is a motion before you that would continue that agreement for the next 3 years and also continue the lease of the senior center facility for that purpose. There is one resolution that combines those two actions for you.
I would move that we adopt a resolution authorizing execution of a lease and a management and operations agreement, both pertaining to the Anderson Senior Center as detailed before us.
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes.
We had a very abbreviated executive session, and we have no items to bring before the board from executive session this evening.
But we did read the specific reason why we went into executive
Yes.
session, did we not?
Yes,
Thank you.
we did.
Okay. Well, apparently that concludes the agenda for this August 15th, 2013 meeting. I thank all of you for your attendance. I thank the viewing audience. And I will make an announcement that our next televised board meeting will occur on September 19th, 2013 at 6 p.m. Citizens may call 688-84 to confirm. And with that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved?
Second?
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Jackson?
Yes.
Ms. Rice?
Yes, thanks. Meeting adjourned.